Marian, Wright, Edelman, For Every Child, by Laura Wingfield. Page 3. Childhood. Marian Wright Edelman has lived a life rich in service to others. For her, helping others is not something to be done in one's spare time. It is something to be done all the time. This is an idea that the parents of young Marian Wright instilled early in each of their 5 children and 12 foster children. Service was as much a part of my upbringing as eating breakfast and going to school, she remembered. It was clear that it was the purpose of life. Born in Bennettsville, South Carolina, in 1939, Marian Wright grew up understanding that each person in her community was connected to every other person. Hers was a loving home. Her father was a minister, and her mother directed the church choir, played the organ, and managed church projects. Both parents expected their children to work hard and told them that, if they had determination, they could succeed in life. Page 4. Marian's parents highly valued work in the community. Service is the rent we pay for living, they said. The Wrights were not rich, but they were generous. Marian and her family brought food to hungry people and visited the sick. Reverend Wright set up a home for poor elderly people, and the Wright children helped to take care of its residents. Marian's parents also valued reading and thinking and learning. Every evening, the children studied together at the kitchen table. Lack of a homework assignment was no excuse not to study. Assign yourself, their father would say. Page 5. Throughout the South, during Marian's childhood, black people and white people lived separately. All of Marian's neighbors were African Americans. So were the children and teachers in her school and the members of her church. Marian felt secure in her community. She spent time not just with friends her own age, but also with adults who cared about her. But Marian knew hurtful times too. One day, when she was about 6, a woman from church brought her to a department store. Marian was thirsty and headed for a water fountain, but the woman pulled Marian away with a harsh tug. The fountain was for whites only. Marian felt suddenly worthless. The hurt cut so deeply that she never forgot it. Page 6. Laws had separated the races for as long as anyone could remember. Marian saw white children splashing and playing in the public swimming pool, but she could not swim there, simply because of her skin color. Even playgrounds and libraries were off limits to her and her friends. In the church, Marian's father preached about rising above injustice. He said that, in the eyes of God, everyone was equal. He said Marian's father believed that segregation did not have to damage people. A person's feelings of self-worth came from within and not from cruel messages from the outside world. Page 7. Marian did not want to accept things that were unjust and wrong. When she was in the 6th grade, she wrote an essay about her beliefs. It was called, "Barriers of Racial Injustice Do Not Have to Be Unsurmountable." Her teachers were impressed. They asked her to read the essay to the whole school in an assembly. Page 8. When Marian was 14, her father suffered a heart attack. Marian rode with him in the ambulance to the hospital. On the way, he talked to his youngest child. He told her not to let anything get in the way of her education and that she could be anything she wanted to be. These were some of the last words Marian's father spoke. He died in the hospital. Marian said many years later that her father died with holes in his shoes because he had spent his money on something he considered more important, sending his children to college. Page 9. College. Marian Wright graduated from high school in 1956 with top honors. It was clear to the other students that their able classmate would achieve great things. She received a scholarship to attend Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. All the students at Spelman College were African American women. The school was known for its strict rules and high standards. Wright focused on her studies. Her initial interest was music, but she began to take classes in a different area, history. She thought she might pursue a career in the Foreign Service to become an official representative of the United States in another country. Page 10. At the end of her second year of college, Wright won a scholarship to spend the following school year in Europe. She lived and studied in Paris, France, and Geneva, Switzerland. She also traveled to Spain, the Netherlands, and Eastern Europe, and she spent a summer in the Soviet Union. Wright met interesting people and visited centers of art and history. That year gave me the confidence that I could navigate in the world and do just about anything, she later said. In Europe, Marian Wright felt a freedom she had never known before. She could visit any museum and any library. She could eat in any restaurant and walk wherever she pleased. Returning to segregated Atlanta after her year abroad was as shocking as a slap in the face. Page 11. When Wright did get back to the United States, though, it was 1959, and big changes were underway. On February 1st, 1960, 4 African American students sat down at a lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. They politely ordered food, but the waitress refused to serve them because the counter was for whites only. The 4 students remained seated. When the lunch counter was closed, they said they would return. The students did return. This time, they came with other students. White supporters joined the sit-in on the 4th day. Day by day, the number of silent protesters grew. They were taunted and called ugly names. They were shoved and even attacked. Yet they sat calmly and bravely, waiting to be served. Page 12. News of the sit-ins spread to college campuses throughout the South. The students at Spelman talked about taking action too. Marian Wright was eager to be a part of the protests. On March 15, 6 weeks after the first lunch counter protest in North Carolina, 200 students from Atlanta colleges followed through on a plan they had made. Page 13. They entered public dining areas in downtown Atlanta. One group sat down in the City Hall cafeteria. Wright led that group. They were arrested and spent the night in jail. In those dangerous yet exciting times, Wright saw opportunities for change. She decided not to pursue a career in the Foreign Service. She wanted to fight for justice at home instead, to help change the laws that kept African Americans segregated and unfairly treated. To give this her best effort, she needed to know how the law worked, so Marian Wright decided to become a lawyer. Page 14. Bringing about change. Wright moved to Connecticut to attend Yale Law School. During one spring break, she visited Mississippi. There, along with other civil rights activists, she helped African Americans register to vote. In 1963, she graduated from law school. The following year, she moved to Mississippi, where she set up an office in the capital, Jackson. After she passed the state's bar exam, allowing her to practice law, Wright became the first female African American lawyer in Mississippi. Wright worked to advance the civil rights of African Americans, especially those who were poor. She handled cases to integrate schools and hospitals. She defended African Americans who had been arrested or punished for trying to register to vote. She also defended college students who worked as she had done, to register voters and were jailed for it. Page 15. Wright's work was hard and dangerous. Like many other civil rights workers, she received threats. However, she learned how to live with fear. The terrible suffering that many of her clients went through gave her the renewed courage to keep working. "I felt I could face anything," she says. Wright's work took her to the poorest areas of Mississippi. Many of her clients were sharecroppers, farmers who had no land of their own but raised crops for a landowner. They could never climb out of that deep pit of poverty. Wright saw starving children with swollen bellies. She saw children who were sick but had no medical care. She saw children who were taken out of school at a young age to work on farms. Wright agonized over the suffering she witnessed. She longed to do more to fight poverty and improve people's lives. Luckily, the President of the United States felt the same way. President Lyndon B. Johnson shared Wright's belief that a rich nation should protect its poorest citizens. He declared a war on poverty in 1964. Congress passed laws to support Johnson's fight, and many programs were set up to fight poverty. One final program was called Operation Head Start. Page 16. Then, as now, middle-income and high-income Americans often sent their children to preschool. These families had money to buy their children books and to visit museums with them. They could afford a good food and regular appointments with doctors and dentists so their kids would grow up strong and healthy. Many children in low-income families were not so lucky. They did not have the same opportunities to receive a good education and proper health care. Operation Head Start was set up for poor children, such as these. From ages 3 to 5, children in Head Start received medical care and food. They also attended classes where they listened to stories, played games, and learned skills such as counting, singing songs, and naming colors. The program was called Head Start because it gave a head start to needy children of preschool age. Marian Wright saw that Head Start could help thousands of children in Mississippi. She helped establish a Head Start program in the state, and she made sure that the program received the money it needed every year to keep running. It became clear to everyone that this young lawyer was a strong leader. Page 18. In 1967, a group of senators invited Marian Wright to Washington, D.C. to speak to them about poverty. Her words were moving, and her manner was confident. She told the senators how desperately poor many Mississippians were. She explained why many families worked hard at farming but still had no money, no food, and no land to call their own. She invited the senators to come to Mississippi to see for themselves what poverty looked like. Page 19. 1 month later, Marian Wright guided Senator Robert F. Kennedy and Senator Joseph Clark on a tour of the Delta region of Mississippi. The senators and their assistants saw families living in shacks with floors made of dirt. People had no electricity and no running water. Worst of all, they had no food. Children were sick and undernourished. Many were starving. The visitors had never seen such poverty in the United States. They were deeply moved and agreed that something had to be done. Kennedy returned to Washington, determined to change the horrible living conditions he had seen. Page 20. Marian Wright formed a friendship with Senator Kennedy. She also began seeing more of Peter Edelman, one of Kennedy's aides. She and Edelman found that they shared important goals and enjoyed each other's company. In 1968, Wright moved to Washington, D.C. One reason was to work on a research project to fight poverty. Another reason was to be closer to Peter Edelman. It was a time of terrible unrest. In April, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., a friend and ally of Wright, was assassinated. Then, in June, Senator Kennedy was assassinated. Two of the nation's most important supporters of poor people were now dead. Thousands of Americans felt hurt and angry. Riots broke out in cities. Divisions between rich and poor, black and white, grew stronger. Page 21. During those sad days, Marian Wright and Peter Edelman took a hopeful step into the future. In the summer of 1968, they married. Page 22. Fighting for children's rights. In Washington, Marian Wright Edelman continued working on behalf of poor people. When she found unfairness, she spoke out. She learned how to gather together groups of people that Congress would pay attention to. She tried to get laws passed in support of Head Start and other programs for children. In 1973, Marian Wright Edelman formed a new organization that worked to improve the lives of poor children. It was called the Children's Defense Fund, or CDF. Edelman argued that a nation must take responsibility for the safety, health, and education of all children. Page 23. Because children could not organize, or vote, or make their needs known to government, they needed a strong voice to speak out for them. As the president of the CDF, Marian Wright Edelman became that voice. The CDF has been successful in getting laws passed to help children in need. It has also drawn attention to issues such as child care for working parents and children's health care. Marian Wright Edelman was once asked how she persuades lawmakers to take action. She explained, "You have to stay on people and make it easier for them to do what you want them to do. Then not to do it," she added. "I'm a good pest." Marian Wright Edelman was given many speeches to spread the word about the importance of valuing children. She has also written books and articles. One book, The Measure of Our Success, A Letter to My Children and Yours, contains 25 lessons that she wants to pass on to her 3 grown sons. They are lessons she learned from her own parents about having confidence, respecting others, and valuing learning. Be a can-do, will-try person, she advises, adding, "If you see a need, don't ask, 'Why doesn't somebody do something?' Ask, 'Why don't I do something?'" Page 24. Marian Wright Edelman has won many awards and honorary degrees. In 2000, she received the highest honor given to an American civilian, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Thinking back to her own childhood, Marian Wright Edelman once said, "There never was a time when I was growing up that I didn't think I could change the world." This remarkable woman possesses an excellent education, a strong belief in service to others, and a deep compassion for those in need. By combining these gifts, she has indeed changed the world, bringing a better life and a new hope to thousands of Americans. The end.